The announcement came through every screen in the galaxy at the same time. The Galactic Council was holding another survival challenge, and this time the rules were different. No technology allowed. Nothing from home. Just survival skills and whatever the planet could provide. Taman stood in the transport ship looking out at the other competitors. He was 34 years old with weather-worn hands and calm eyes. Back on Earth, he taught people how to survive in the mountains of Korea. He knew how to start fires, build shelters, and find food where others saw nothing. But he had never expected to use those skills in space. Next to him stood Hana, a young woman with sharp eyes and quick hands. She was 28 and had spent years studying how ancient humans made tools and survived. She knew things that most people had forgotten. Things about stone and bone and fire that seemed useless in a world of computers and starships. Junho completed their team. At 31, he was the youngest, but his military background made him valuable. He could look at any problem and find a solution. He could take materials and make them into something useful. He was practical and calm, even now as they prepared to drop onto an alien world. The ship's viewing screen showed the other teams. The Vexthari looked worried. They were water creatures, used to swimming in their gel-filled suits. Without their technology, they would struggle on dry land. The Krell stood in neat rows already talking about plans and strategies. They loved rules and order. The Thornax barely moved. They were made of living crystal and silicon, slow and patient. There were 12 teams in total. Each species had sent their best. The challenge would last 30 days on a planet chosen for its Earth-like conditions. Cameras in orbit would watch everything. Billions of beings across the galaxy would tune in to see who could survive without the comforts of modern civilization. Taman felt the ship descending. Through the window he saw forests and rivers, mountains in the distance. It looked like home. That was good. Humans had lived in places like this for hundreds of thousands of years. His ancestors had walked through forests just like these with nothing but their hands and their minds. The landing was gentle. The door opened and warm air rushed in. Taman stepped out first, his feet touching alien soil that felt remarkably like earth dirt. Hana and Junho followed. They stood together for a moment looking at the forest around them. No tools, no supplies, just us, Junho said quietly. Just like the old days, Hana replied with a small smile. The other teams were being dropped in different zones, far enough apart that they wouldn't interfere with each other. The humans were alone in their section of forest. Somewhere above, cameras were recording their every move. Taman didn't waste time. We need fire before dark. Hana, look for good stone. Junho, find straight branches. I'll make a fire starter. They split up but stayed close enough to see each other. Taman found a dead tree with dry wood. He pulled off a flat piece of bark and found a straight stick. His hands moved automatically, doing what humans had done for ages. He carved a small notch in the bark, placed the stick in it, and began to spin. Hana moved through the forest like she was reading a book. She picked up stones, tested their edges, and kept the good ones. She found flint-like rocks that would chip into sharp edges. She found other stones that were heavy and good for hammering. Her backpack from the ship had been empty, so she made a carrier from her jacket, tying the sleeves together. Junho collected branches, testing each one for straightness and strength. He found young saplings that were flexible. He found older wood that was hard and dense. He broke off pieces and sorted them by use. Already his mind was planning what to build. 2 hours after landing, smoke began to rise from Taman's fire starter. He had spun the stick so fast and so long that the friction created an ember. He carefully transferred it to a bundle of dry grass and blew gently. Flames appeared, the first fire on the planet made by human hands. Across the galaxy, viewers sat up and paid attention. The humans had fire already? The other teams were still looking for shelter locations. The Krell were still voting on where to set up camp. The Vexthari were trying to find water, but the humans had fire. By nightfall, the human camp was taking shape. Taman kept the fire going, feeding it carefully. Hana had made 3 stone tools, chipping the edges until they were sharp enough to cut. Junho had built a simple frame for a shelter using the branches he collected. They worked together to weave smaller branches through the frame and cover it with leaves and bark. They didn't have food yet, but that could wait until morning. They had fire. They had shelter. They had cutting tools. It was more than enough for the first day. The three of them sat around the fire as darkness fell. Above them, stars appeared in an alien sky, but the fire was the same. Fire was always the same, warm and bright and comforting. The other teams will take days to get this far, Hana said, holding her hands toward the flames. Maybe they never will, Junho replied. Most species never needed to learn this. They jumped straight to advanced technology. Taemin poked the fire with a stick, sending sparks upward. We didn't have that choice. For most of human history, this was our technology. Fire and stone and wood. We got good at it because we had to. In the Galactic Council's monitoring station, the officials watched the human feed with confusion. The survival challenge had been designed to test problem-solving and adaptation. It was supposed to be difficult. It was supposed to push each species to their limits, but the humans looked comfortable. They looked like they did this every day. One official, a tall Vexathari with blue-tinted skin, turned to her colleague. Did we make a mistake? The humans appear to have an unfair advantage. The colleague, a Krell with scales that shimmered in the station's light, shook his head slowly. We checked the rules carefully. They brought no technology. They used only what they found on the planet. Everything they did is allowed. But how did they know what to do? They landed and immediately started making tools and fire. There was no trial and error, no learning period. Perhaps, the Krell said thoughtfully. They already knew. Perhaps for humans, this is not a challenge. This is Tuesday. Back on the planet, Taemin added more wood to the fire. The shelter was solid enough to keep them dry if it rained. Tomorrow they would improve it. Tomorrow they would find food and water. Tomorrow they would make better tools. But tonight they had already won the first day. While other teams struggled with basic survival, the humans were planning their next projects. Fire crackled and popped, orange light dancing on their faces. Junho was already sketching in the dirt, planning a fish trap design. Hana was sorting her stones, deciding which tools to make next. Taemin was measuring distances with his eyes, identifying the best spots for snares and traps. They were humans. This was what humans did. For 200,000 years they had survived in places just like this. The planet was different, but the principles were the same. Fire, shelter, food, water. Everything else was just details. Above them, the galaxy watched and wondered. The competition had only just begun, but already the humans had changed everything. They had reminded the advanced species of something important and frightening. Before technology, before starships, before civilization itself, you had to survive. And humans were very, very good at surviving. Morning came with bird sounds that weren't quite like Earth birds, but close enough. Taemin woke first, as he always did. The fire had burned down to coals during the night. He added small sticks and blew gently until flames appeared again. The others would wake soon, and they would need the fire. Hana emerged from the shelter, stretching. She looked rested despite sleeping on the ground. I dreamed about spear points, she said with a slight smile. I know exactly what we need to make today. Junho crawled out next, already checking the shelter's structure. This will hold for now, but we should build something better. Something permanent. They ate some wild berries Hana had identified the previous evening. Not much, but enough to start the day. Water was nearby in a clear stream. They had the basics covered. Now it was time to move beyond basics. Hana took the lead on tool making. She had spent years studying how ancient humans created their equipment. She had practiced the techniques until her hands knew them by heart. Now on an alien planet, that knowledge was priceless. She sat by the fire with her collection of stones. The first stone tool she made was simple, just a sharp flake. But the second was more complex. She chose a larger rock and began to chip it carefully, removing flakes in a specific pattern. Slowly, a hand axe took shape. It had a sharp edge on one side and a rounded back that fit comfortably in the palm. This is called a hand axe, she explained, knowing the cameras were watching. Humans made these for over 1 million years. They're perfect for cutting, chopping, and scraping. Next came something more advanced. She found a long, straight branch and began to shape it into a spear shaft. Then she carefully chipped a stone point, making it thin and sharp. The tricky part was attaching them together. She used strips of bark as cordage, binding the stone point tightly to the wooden shaft. The result was a spear that could pierce and kill. But Hana wasn't finished. She made another tool. This one from a leg bone she found in the forest. Some animal had died here and its bones were gifts. She split the bone carefully and shaped it into a needle, using stone tools to drill a hole at one end. With plant fibers as thread, they could now sew. Junho watched her work, impressed. We're building an entire toolkit from nothing. Not from nothing, Hana corrected. From everything. The forest provides. You just have to know where to look and what to do with it. Across the galaxy, commentators were struggling to explain what they were seeing. The human feed had become the most popular channel. Other teams were still dealing with basic survival, but the humans were having what looked like a crafting session. One broadcaster, a mind weaver with telepathic abilities, tried to put it into context. What we're witnessing is not spontaneous creation. This is inherited knowledge. Humans spent hundreds of thousands of years perfecting these techniques. Every human child learns simplified versions of these skills. For them, this is cultural memory. Taemin and Junho left camp mid-morning to hunt. They carried the spears Hana had made and moved through the forest silently. Taemin had taught wilderness tracking for years. He could read the forest like a story. Broken branches told him where animals passed. Tracks in soft soil showed their direction. Droppings indicated what they ate and how recently. They found a game trail and followed it. Hand signals passed between them. They had done this before, back on Earth. The planet was different, but hunting was hunting. Patience, observation, and opportunity. The animal they found looked like a cross between a deer and something reptilian. It was large enough to feed them for days. It grazed on ferns near a clearing, unaware of the humans watching from the trees. Junho went left. Taemin went right. They circled slowly, using the wind to hide their scent. When they were in position, Taemin made a sharp whistle. The animal's head came up, alert. That moment of confusion was enough. Both spears flew. Taemin struck the shoulder. Junho's hit the neck. The creature ran but didn't get far. The humans tracked the blood trail and found it collapsed in a thicket. It was already dead. They carried it back to camp, taking turns with the weight. Hana had the fire ready and had made more tools while they were gone. She had created scrapers for cleaning the hide and sharp flakes for butchering. The butchering took hours, but they didn't waste anything. The meat was cut into strips and hung on racks to smoke over the fire. The hide was stretched and scraped clean, ready to be turned into leather. Bones were saved for tools. Sinew would become strong cordage. Even the organs had uses. By evening, their camp looked completely different from just one day ago. They had food hanging everywhere, drying and smoking. They had a growing collection of tools. The shelter had been improved with a raised sleeping platform to keep them off the cold ground. A fire pit was dug properly with rocks to contain the heat. Other teams were not doing as well. The Vexthari had finally built a shelter that could hold water, but they had no food yet. Their bodies needed moisture constantly, so they spent most of their time in the stream. The Krell were still debating the best approach to hunting. Their democratic process required consensus, which took time. The Thornax had found a sunny spot and were simply absorbing minerals from the ground. They were patient, but they weren't progressing. The shardlings made of crystal had created beautiful structures that caught the light in amazing ways. But beauty didn't help with survival. Their shelters looked impressive but offered no real protection. They had no concept of practical construction. 2 teams had already quit. The silvery quick minds couldn't handle the lack of mental stimulation. Without their computers and databases, they felt lost and panicked. The flame dancers needed specific atmospheric conditions that the planet didn't provide. Both teams had pressed their emergency beacons and been retrieved by council ships. The humans, meanwhile, were thriving. Taemin had made something called an atlatl, a tool that made throwing spears much more powerful. It was a stick with a hook on the end that extended the arm's length and multiplied force. With it, he could throw a spear twice as far and 3 times as hard. Junho had created a fish trap from woven branches. He placed it in the stream where water flowed fast. Fish swam in but couldn't find their way out. By evening, they had caught 4 fat fish without any effort. Hana had been working on something special. She had found clay by the stream and was shaping it into bowls. She placed them near the fire to dry. Tomorrow, she would fire them properly, making the first pottery on this planet. With pottery, they could boil water, cook stews, and store food safely. As darkness fell, the 3 humans sat around their fire again. The camp glowed with firelight. Smoke from the meat racks drifted upward. Everything smelled of wood smoke and cooking food. "We're ahead of schedule," Junho said, carving a piece of wood into a new tool handle. "We're ahead of everyone," Hana replied. "I checked the other feeds during my break. Most teams are still working on basic shelter." Taemin fed the fire and watched the flames dance. They'll catch up eventually. They're smart species. They just need to figure out the basics. Maybe, Hana said thoughtfully, but we had 200,000 years to figure out these basics. They're learning in days what took us millennia to master. In the council monitoring station, emergency meetings were being held. Complaints were piling up from the other teams. The challenge was supposed to be fair, but the humans seemed to be playing a different game entirely. A Krell official stood before the council. The humans are using advanced techniques that border on technology. They have weapons, tools, and even chemical processes like smoking meat. This goes beyond simple survival. The chief arbiter, ancient and wise, shook her head. We reviewed the rules carefully. All their tools are made from natural materials using only their hands and minds. No banned technology is being used. The fact that they know these techniques is not against the rules. But it's not fair, the Krell protested. They have an unfair advantage. They have knowledge, the chief arbiter corrected. Knowledge gained over eons of surviving exactly this way. Other species develop technology through different means. Biological advantages, psychic powers, mechanical innovation. Humans developed it through necessity and practice. We cannot fault them for being good at something they spent their entire species' history learning. Back on the planet, Taman was teaching the others a new skill. He showed them how to read the stars for navigation, how to judge time by the sun's position, how to predict weather by watching clouds and wind. These were things every human explorer had known, back before GPS and computers. The galaxy was learning something about humanity. They were learning that before humans built starships, they had built something more fundamental. They had built the skills to survive anywhere with nothing. And those skills didn't disappear just because better technology came along. They were still there, waiting in the cultural memory, ready to be used when needed. The second day ended with the humans ahead by an enormous margin. They had food, water, shelter, fire, tools, and weapons. They had everything they needed and were already working on things they wanted. While other species struggled to survive, the humans were beginning to thrive. 1 week into the challenge, the difference between the human camp and everyone else was impossible to ignore. The humans had built what looked like a small village. Their main shelter was now raised off the ground with a proper thatched roof. The fire pit had evolved into a clay-lined hearth. Storage baskets woven from reeds hung from the shelter's supports. Leather clothing replaced their original clothes, which were wearing out. The fire never went out. That was the key to everything. Taman tended it constantly, knowing that fire was life. It cooked their food, making it safer and easier to digest. It hardened their wooden tools, turning them from soft to rock hard. It kept predators away at night. It boiled water, killing anything dangerous in it. It provided warmth, light, and comfort. Other teams struggled with fire. The Vexthari feared it because it evaporated their moisture. The Krell had finally made fire through friction, but it took them 3 days and left their hands raw and blistered. The Shardlings couldn't make fire at all and didn't really need it, though they were starting to understand they were missing something important. Hana had set up what she called a workshop area. Stones were sorted by type and quality. Wood was organized by hardness and flexibility. She had multiple projects going at once. Clay pots were drying. Leather was being tanned using a mixture of animal brains and wood ash, an ancient technique that worked perfectly. She was even experimenting with natural dyes from berries and bark. Her latest creation was a hand-drill fire starter, better than Taman's original friction method. It used a bow to spin the drill faster with less effort. She demonstrated it for the cameras, explaining each step. This is technology. This is human technology. We didn't need circuits or power sources. We needed understanding and practice. Junho had become the camp's engineer. He built a raised drying rack that used smoke from the fire without exposing the meat to direct heat. He created a simple loom and was teaching himself to weave. He made better spears with balanced weight and aerodynamic design. He was even working on a bow, though getting the right tension was challenging without modern materials. The fish trap was bringing in steady food. Unyo checked it every morning and evening, always finding something. He improved the design, making it larger and more efficient. Now he was planning a second trap upstream, but it was the pottery that impressed the galaxy most. Hana had fired her clay bowls in a pit filled with hot coals. The result was hard, waterproof containers. With these, they could boil water safely, cook stews, and store food without spoilage. Pottery was a huge technological leap, and the humans had achieved it in less than a week. One evening, Junho set up a demonstration. He boiled water in a clay pot, dropped in some fish and wild vegetables, and made a proper stew. The three of them ate from wooden bowls while the galaxy watched. It looked comfortable. It looked easy. It looked like they were having a camping trip instead of fighting for survival. The contrast with other teams was stark. The Krell had finally established a stable camp, but they were exhausted from the constant work. Their democratic process slowed everything down. Every decision required discussion and voting. By the time they agreed on something, the humans had already done 3 more things. The Mindweavers were struggling badly. They were telepaths used to sharing thoughts instantly. Without their neural amplifiers, communication was slow and frustrating. They felt isolated in their own heads. 2 of them had already requested evacuation due to psychological stress. The Thornax were stable but unchanging. They needed very little, which was both strength and weakness. They had shelter, basic food from mineral absorption and patience. But they weren't innovating or improving. They were just existing. 2 more teams had quit during the week. The nebula drifters couldn't adapt to solid ground after evolving in gas giant atmospheres. The Photon Collective, beings of living light, found the planet's day-night cycle disorienting and painful. They left after 4 days, unable to cope. That left only 6 teams still competing. And of those 6, only the humans looked truly comfortable. Taman had started mapping the area. He created a detailed chart using charcoal on a flat piece of bark. He marked water sources, good hunting areas, dangerous terrain, and useful resource locations. It was accurate and detailed, showing the same spatial awareness that had allowed ancient humans to navigate vast distances. He also established a territory, using scent markers and signs that predators would understand. He claimed the area around their camp as human hunting grounds. It was an old technique used by humans for thousands of years. Mark your territory. Defend it if necessary. Other predators understood and mostly stayed away. The galaxy's response to the human performance was mixed. Some species were impressed. Others were disturbed. A few were angry, claiming the challenge was unfair. A famous Vexthari scientist appeared on the most popular broadcast channel. "We need to understand what we're seeing," she explained to billions of viewers. "Humans are not naturally superior survivors. They have no armor, no natural weapons, no environmental resistances. They're actually quite fragile physically." She brought up statistics. A human can be killed by a fall that wouldn't hurt a Krell. They can't survive in water like Vexthari. They can't digest minerals like Thornax. They're weak in almost every measurable way. The broadcast showed comparison charts. Humans ranked near the bottom in strength, speed, and durability. But then the scientist pulled up different data. However, humans have something unique. They have cultural inheritance of survival techniques spanning hundreds of thousands of years. They remember how to survive because forgetting meant death for most of their history. Another expert, a Krell historian, added his perspective. Most species went straight from primitive to advanced through biological evolution or sudden technological breakthroughs. Humans had a long, slow climb. They spent 200,000 years with nothing but stone tools and fire. That's 200,000 years of learning, practicing, and perfecting these exact skills. The broadcast showed footage from the human camp. Taman was demonstrating spear-throwing techniques. Hana was teaching herself basket weaving. Junyo was improving their shelter's roof. They moved with confidence and skill, never hesitating, always knowing what to do next. "This is the result of deep time," the historian continued. "When a skill is practiced by a species for thousands of generations, it becomes part of their cultural DNA. It's not just knowledge. It's instinct refined by practice. The humans don't have to think about these things. They just know." Back at the camp, something interesting was happening. The Spore Mind Collective, a team of fungal beings that operated as a hive mind, had sent a communication request. The council allowed limited inter-team contact for diplomatic or educational purposes. Hana accepted the communication. A drone appeared carrying the Spore Mind's message. "We wish to learn. Our team is failing. We see that humans succeed. Will you teach us?" The 3 humans discussed it briefly. There was no rule against teaching. The competition was about survival, not secrecy. "Yes," Hana replied to the drone. "We'll teach you what we can." Over the next 2 days, the Spore Mind sent observers. The fungal beings learned quickly because they were a collective mind. When one learned something, all learned it. Hana taught them firemaking. Taman showed them hunting techniques. Junyo demonstrated basic tool creation. The spore mind absorbed everything. Within 48 hours they had fire, basic tools, and working traps. Their camp transformed from desperate to functional. They sent a message of gratitude. You have saved us. This knowledge is precious. We understand now why humans are different. The galaxy watched this exchange with fascination. The humans could have kept their knowledge secret, ensuring their victory. Instead, they shared freely. It was a very human thing to do. Teach others. Pass on knowledge. That was how humans had survived. Not by hoarding information, but by sharing it. The council held another emergency meeting. Some members wanted to change the rules mid-competition. The humans are too far ahead. It's not fair to the other teams. But the chief arbiter was firm. We cannot change rules during a competition. That would be truly unfair. The humans have broken no rules. They are simply better prepared for this specific challenge than anyone anticipated. A Krell council member stood. Perhaps the lesson here is that we chose the wrong challenge. Or perhaps the right challenge but didn't understand what it would reveal. We tested survival skills and we discovered that humans are the galaxy's survival experts. As the second week ended, the rankings were clear. Humans led by an enormous margin. The Spore Mind Collective had jumped to second place thanks to human teaching. The Thornax held steady in third through sheer patience. The Krell were fourth, exhausted but functional. The Mind Weavers were barely hanging on in fifth place. The Shardlings in last place were beautiful but impractical. Their crystalline nature made tool use nearly impossible. They had created art instead of survival equipment, which was admirable but not helpful for staying alive. Taman sat by the fire that night, watching sparks rise into the darkness. We're going to win this easily, he said quietly. Yes, Hana agreed. But that's not really the point anymore, is it? The galaxy is learning something. Day 15 brought a warning from the council. The orbital scanners had detected a massive storm system moving toward the competition area. All teams were advised to secure their camps and prepare for severe weather. The storm would hit within 24 hours and last for approximately 3 days. Taman received the warning and immediately shifted into emergency mode. We have 1 day to prepare. Everything we've built needs to survive 3 days of heavy rain and wind. The 3 humans split up, each taking responsibility for different preparations. Hana focused on securing their food supplies. Everything had to be protected from moisture. She wrapped dried meat in layers of bark and stored it in the driest part of their shelter. Clay pots were moved under cover. She dug small drainage trenches around the food storage areas. Junho worked on the shelter itself. He added extra support poles, making the structure stronger. He reinforced the roof with additional layers of bark and leaves. He checked every rope binding, retying anything that looked weak. He built a rain catch system that would collect fresh water during the storm, filling their clay vessels. Taman concentrated on the fire. This was critical. Fire was everything and it had to survive the storm. He built a protective cover using logs and bark, creating a small dry space where coals could be kept alive. He prepared multiple fire-starting kits, wrapping them in waterproof layers of animal fat and bark. He gathered extra dry wood and stored it inside the shelter where it would stay dry. By nightfall, their camp looked like a fortress. Everything was secured, covered, or stored. They had enough food for a week. They had clean water. They had fire protection. Most importantly, they had a plan. Across the planet, other teams were panicking. The Vexithari didn't mind water, but the storm's violence worried them. Their shelter was barely adequate for normal conditions. The Krell were still debating what actions to take. Consensus was proving difficult under pressure. Some wanted to reinforce the shelter. Others wanted to evacuate. The argument consumed precious preparation time. The Mind Weavers were already in crisis. Without their mental amplifiers, they struggled with stress management. The approaching storm triggered what looked like psychological breakdown. 2 of them activated emergency beacons immediately, unable to cope with the anxiety. The Shardlings were in real danger. Their beautiful crystal structures were strong but inflexible. High winds could shatter them. They had no concept of flexible engineering, no understanding of how to build something that could bend without breaking. Their team leader sent an urgent request for guidance to the council. The Thornax were unconcerned. Being silicon-based, they didn't care about water. They simply found sheltered spots among rocks and settled in to wait. The storm would pass. They would endure. That was enough for them. The Spore Mind Collective, having learned from the humans, were better prepared than most. They had built their shelter using human techniques. It wasn't as good as the human camp, but it was functional. They had fire protection and food stores. They would likely survive. The storm arrived exactly when predicted. It came with terrifying power. Wind screamed through the forest, bending trees and tearing at anything not secured. Rain fell in sheets so thick that visibility dropped to almost nothing. Lightning cracked across the sky, and thunder rolled like continuous explosions. Inside their reinforced shelter, the three humans stayed dry and calm. Taman monitored the fire constantly, feeding it small pieces of the protected dry wood. The flames stayed alive, providing warmth and light. Hana checked their food supplies periodically, making sure nothing was getting wet. Junho inspected the shelter structure, tightening any ropes that loosened. They had nothing to do but wait, so they talked. They told stories. They sang old songs from Earth. Junho carved small figures from wood, creating art just to pass the time. This was what humans did during storms. They stayed safe, stayed warm, and stayed sane. The galaxy watched in amazement. The human camp was holding perfectly. While other species panicked or suffered, the humans looked almost comfortable. They had turned a survival crisis into downtime. On the second day of the storm, emergency signals began appearing. The Krell team activated their beacon. Their shelter had collapsed and they were exposed to the full force of the storm. The rescue ship descended through dangerous conditions to retrieve them. They were eliminated from the competition, exhausted and defeated. The Vexthari sent a distress call hours later. The storm had destroyed their water retention systems, and they were dehydrating rapidly despite the rain. They needed emergency evacuation. Another team gone. The Shardlings' shelter shattered in the wind, exactly as feared. Sharp crystal fragments flew through the air like dangerous projectiles. They activated their beacon immediately, fearing injury. The rescue team extracted them carefully and another competitor was eliminated. 3 teams eliminated in a single storm. Only 3 remained besides the humans. The Spore Mind Collective was struggling but surviving. The Thornax were simply waiting it out with their usual patience. The Mindweavers, down to 2 members after the earlier evacuations, were holding on by sheer determination. Inside the human shelter, Junho was teaching the others a card game using pieces of bark he had marked with charcoal. They played by firelight, laughing occasionally at good plays or bad luck. The storm raged outside, but inside they were dry, warm, and even entertained. "This reminds me of camping trips back home," Hana said, studying her cards. "Stuck in a tent during a storm, playing games until it passes." "Except those tents had zippers," Junho replied with a smile. "And we usually had hot chocolate." Taman won the round and collected his winnings of small pebbles they were using as currency. "We could make something like hot chocolate. There are plants here that might work. When the storm passes, I'll look for them." This casual conversation was broadcast across the galaxy. Other species heard humans talking about making recreational drinks and playing games during what was supposed to be a survival crisis. It was so normal, so comfortable, so human. A Vexthari commentator tried to explain it to her audience. Humans evolved in a dangerous world. Storms like this happened regularly. They learned to prepare, then wait them out safely. For them, this isn't a crisis. This is just weather. On the 3rd day, the storm began to weaken. The wind dropped from screaming to merely howling. The rain decreased from sheets to heavy drops. By evening, it was tapering off completely. The humans had survived 3 days of severe weather without any real difficulty. When it was finally safe to go outside, Taman emerged first. He checked the camp carefully. Some minor damage to the outer edges, a few fallen branches, but their main shelter stood strong. The fire was still alive, protected and tended. Food supplies were dry and secure. Everything had worked exactly as planned. Hana and Junho joined him, surveying their domain. The forest looked battered but recovering. Streams ran high with stormwater. The sky was clearing, revealing late afternoon sun. "We should check the traps," Junho said. "The storm might have broken them." They found most of the traps intact. One fish trap had been destroyed by high water, but Junho could rebuild it easily. The snares on land were fine. Everything could be repaired or replaced. The council updated the team standings. Of the 12 original teams, only 4 remained. The humans led by an absurd margin. The Spore Mind Collective was second, having survived the storm using techniques learned from humans. The Thornacs were third, unchanged and patient as always. The Mindweavers were fourth and barely functioning, down to just 2 members who were considering evacuation. That evening, as the humans sat around their rebuilt fire, they received another communication from the Sporemind Collective. You saved us twice now. First with knowledge, then with that knowledge proven in crisis. We acknowledge human superiority and survival. Hana responded carefully. Not superiority, experience. We've done this for a very long time. Long enough that it became part of who we are. The Sporemind replied, that is a form of superiority. The superiority of deep practice and cultural memory. We thought technology made us advanced. But you show us that some knowledge predates technology and might be more fundamental. Across the galaxy, the conversation was analyzed and debated. Philosophers argued about the nature of advancement. Were humans actually primitive, or were they advanced in ways that other species couldn't recognize? Was survival skill a lower form of knowledge, or was it the foundation all other knowledge built upon? Taman didn't care about these debates. He was busy improving the camp after the storm. The shelter could be better. The fire pit needed refinement. There were projects he had been planning that he could now complete. Junho was already rebuilding the destroyed fish trap, making it stronger this time. He had learned from the storm's power and was adapting his designs. Hana was checking her tool collection, repairing anything damaged by moisture, improving anything that could be better. They were humans. They survived the storm because that's what humans did. They had survived worse storms for hundreds of thousands of years. This was just one more storm in an endless history of storms, and like all the others, they had weathered it, learned from it, and emerged ready to continue. The competition had 15 days remaining, but the outcome was already certain. The final week of the competition was less about survival and more about demonstration. The humans had already won. Everyone knew it. The Sporemind Collective had formally acknowledged it. Even the council admitted it privately. But the competition would run its full 30 days, and the humans used that time to show the galaxy what their species was truly capable of. Junho completed his bow project on day 23. The weapon was beautiful and functional, made from flexible wood that he had carefully shaped and seasoned. The string was twisted sinew, incredibly strong. The arrows were straight, fletched with feathers and tipped with sharp stone points. He tested it, and the arrows flew fast and true, hitting targets from impressive distances. The galaxy watched him demonstrate the weapon. He could hit a target the size of his hand from 50 paces. He could fire arrows faster than anyone could throw a spear. The bow was a revolution in hunting technology, and he had created it from forest materials in less than a month. Taman had built multiple fish traps that required no supervision. He checked them twice a day and always found food. He had expanded their territory, marking safe paths and dangerous areas. He had created a detailed understanding of the local ecosystem, knowing where every plant and animal could be found. He was living in harmony with the environment, taking what he needed but never depleting resources. Hana had produced an impressive array of tools and crafts. She had pottery for storage and cooking. She had woven baskets in multiple sizes. She had tanned leather that was soft and workable. She had created bone needles, stone knives, wooden bowls, and cordage of various strengths. She had even made a primitive loom and was weaving cloth from plant fibers. Most impressively, she had created a star chart. Using charcoal and memory, she had mapped the alien sky, identifying patterns and navigation points. It was accurate and detailed, showing that humans could orient themselves anywhere in the universe using nothing but observation and understanding. Their camp had evolved into something approaching a permanent settlement. The shelter was now a proper structure with multiple rooms. They had a dedicated cooking area, a tool workshop, a storage area, and sleeping quarters. They had furniture made from wood and woven materials. They had lighting from carefully placed fires and fat lamps. They had more food than they could eat. Smoked meat, dried fish, preserved fruits, and stored grains from wild plants. They had clean water stored in multiple clay vessels. They had warm clothing made from animal hides. They had everything they needed and most of what they wanted. The contrast with the remaining teams was impossible to ignore. The Mindweavers had finally evacuated on day 25. The psychological stress had become too much. They left the competition mentally exhausted but physically unharmed. They acknowledged that their species was simply not built for this kind of challenge. The Thornax continued their patient existence. They had survived the entire competition through sheer endurance. They hadn't innovated or improved, but they hadn't needed to. Their silicon-based biology required very little, and they could simply outlast most challenges. They would finish the competition in third place, which was respectable. The Spore-Mind Collective had improved dramatically after learning from the humans. They had fire, basic tools, adequate shelter, and enough food. They would finish second, and they were proud of that achievement. They had learned more in this month than in years of normal existence. They sent regular messages to the humans, thanking them for the knowledge that had saved their team. On day 28, something unexpected happened. The council requested a special demonstration from the human team. They wanted the humans to explain their techniques to a galactic audience. It would be the most watched educational program in history. The three humans agreed. They spent the day demonstrating everything they had learned and done. Taman showed fire making using multiple methods. He explained friction fire, hand drill, bow drill, and even fire from striking rocks. He showed how to maintain fire, how to use it for multiple purposes, and why it was so central to human survival. Hana taught tool-making from basic principles. She showed how to identify good stone, how to chip it properly, how to create specific tool shapes for specific purposes. She demonstrated hafting tools to handles, creating composite implements that were stronger than their parts. She showed pottery making, basket weaving, and leather tanning. Each demonstration built on previous knowledge, showing how human technology progressed logically from simple to complex. Junho covered hunting, trapping, and construction. He showed tracking skills, explaining how to read signs and understand animal behavior. He demonstrated the atlatl and bow, explaining the physics of projectile weapons. He showed how to build shelters that were strong, weatherproof, and comfortable. He explained fish trap design and passive food gathering. The broadcast reached billions of viewers across 47 star systems. Schools used it as educational material. Scientists analyzed every technique. Philosophers debated its implications. The humans were teaching the galaxy how to survive without technology. One particularly powerful moment came when Hana addressed the audience directly. People are calling this primitive technology. They're wrong. This is sophisticated technology. It requires understanding of materials, physics, chemistry, biology, and engineering. It requires knowledge passed down through generations and refined through practice. Just because it doesn't use circuits or power sources doesn't make it simple. It makes it fundamental. Taman added his perspective. Every human carries this knowledge in their culture. We teach our children how to make fire, build shelter, and find food. Not because we need to anymore, but because we remember when forgetting meant death. It's part of who we are. It connects us to our ancestors who survived so that we could exist. Junho finished the thought. Technology didn't make humans successful. Humans made technology. We started with nothing but curiosity and hands. Everything we've built, from stone tools to starships, comes from that same source. The ability to observe, understand, adapt, and create. That's what makes us human. The final day arrived. The competition officially ended at noon, Galactic Standard Time. The humans spent the morning teaching the Spore-Mind Collective one last technique. They showed them how to create long-term food storage using smoking, drying, and clay vessels. It was a gift of knowledge that would help the fungal beings even after the competition ended. When the retrieval ships arrived, the humans packed carefully. They took samples of their tools, wanting to keep them as memories. They made sure the fire was completely out, leaving no danger to the forest. They cleaned the campsite, removing all signs of their presence. It was the way they had been taught. Leave no trace. Respect the environment that sustained you. The award ceremony was held on the council's main station. Representatives from every galactic species attended. The humans arrived wearing their handmade leather clothing and carrying their tools. They looked out of place among beings in advanced garments and technological enhancements, but they also looked capable and confident. The chief arbiter, the ancient Vexthari who led the council, spoke to the assembled crowd. This competition has taught us more than we expected. We designed it to test survival skills and adaptability. We learned instead that survival is not just about adapting to challenges. It is about remembering how to live when everything is taken away. She gestured to the humans. These beings won not because they are stronger or smarter. They won because their entire species' history prepared them for exactly this challenge. For 200,000 years, humans lived as we asked them to live in this competition. They mastered it so completely that the knowledge became permanent, part of their cultural identity. The Spore-Mind Collective's representative spoke next. We learned from humans, and that learning saved us. They could have kept their knowledge secret, ensuring their victory. Instead, they taught us freely. This is also very human. They survived as a species not just through individual skill, but through sharing knowledge across generations and even across species. Taman stepped forward to accept the award on behalf of humanity. It was a crystal structure that represented survival excellence, beautiful and meaningful. He held it carefully and spoke simply. We don't see ourselves as special. We're just survivors who never forgot how to survive. Every species here has amazing abilities. You have biological adaptations, technological innovations, and mental capabilities that we can't match. But we have something else. We have the memory of being weak and making ourselves strong through tools and knowledge. We have the legacy of 200,000 years of practice. He paused, looking at the assembled representatives. This competition showed us that primitive doesn't mean inferior. It means foundational. The skills we used are the foundation that all our later technology built upon. We didn't abandon them when we reached the stars. We kept them because they remind us who we are and where we came from. Hana spoke next. We hope this competition helps other species understand humans better. We're strange in the galaxy because we came from weakness instead of strength. We're strange because we remember our past instead of leaving it behind.